Hello, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're diving into something a bit different, something that's literally unfolding as we speak. Today is January 7th, 2026, and if hundreds of thousands of Stranger Things fans are right, we're about to witness one of the most brilliant plot twists in television history. So what's happening? Well, Stranger Things ended on New Year's Eve. 10 years, 8 episodes, done and dusted. Except loads of people aren't buying it. They think the finale we saw was fake, that everyone's trapped in a Vecna-created illusion, and that the real ending drops today. They're calling it Conformity Gate, and honestly, the evidence is absolutely fascinating. Tonight we're examining every clue, every theory, every piece of this wild puzzle. There's plenty to get talking about, so if you like what I do here and want a way to support the channel, consider subscribing down below. But for now, grab your favourite blanket, settle in, and let's begin. So way before we can understand why this theory exists, we need to talk about what actually happened in the Stranger Things finale. Or, well, what we think happened. The finale, episode 8, was called The Right Side Up, and it clocked in at just over 2 hours. It dropped on New Year's Eve, which was already a bit emotional for fans who'd been with the show since 2016. 10 years all coming to an end on the last day of 2025. The episode itself was split into two pretty distinct halves. The first half was pure action. The party executed their plan to defeat Vecna once and for all. 11, who'd been training and preparing throughout the season, finally confronted the Mind Flayer inside Henry Creel's twisted mindscape. It was this massive, visually stunning sequence with 11 navigating through Henry's memories, whilst the rest of the gang fought his physical form back in the real world. Meanwhile, Mike had constructed this bomb, which sounds absolutely mental when you say it out loud. But there you go. The plan was to destroy the Upside Down entirely, seal it off forever, make sure Vecna could never return. Joyce Byers, armed with an axe, because of course she was, managed to deliver what looked like the killing blow to Vecna. She literally beheaded him after 11 had weakened him enough. It was brutal, it was final, it was everything fans had been waiting for. But here's where things get interesting. When the party made it back topside, back to the right side up, they found themselves surrounded by the military. Dr. Kay, who'd been hunting 11 throughout the season, was there with her forces. She made it very clear that 11 was still considered a threat, still someone who needed to be contained or eliminated. The government wasn't about to let a girl with superpowers just walk away, war hero or not. And then 11 made a choice. As the bomb Mike built was counting down, as the Upside Down was collapsing, 11 apparently sacrificed herself. She stayed behind, or so it seemed, to ensure the portal closed properly and to give her friends and family a chance at a normal life. The implication was that Dr. K and her people would stop hunting everyone if 11 was gone. The Upside Down exploded in this massive burst of light. Everything went white, very dramatic, very final. And then we got the epilogue. This is the bit that's got everyone talking. The episode jumped forward 18 months. Suddenly it's 1989 and we're at Hawkins High's graduation ceremony. Will, Mike, Lucas, Dustin and Max are all graduating together, which is lovely. But the tone of this epilogue was just different. It felt weirdly calm, weirdly settled, weirdly perfect. Nancy Wheeler had moved away. She'd taken a journalism job in another city, finally pursuing her dreams. Jonathan went with her, and they seemed happy and stable. Robin had also left Hawkins, off to college presumably, though we didn't get loads of detail. Steve, interestingly, had stayed behind. He'd become a teacher at Hawkins High, coaching baseball or something similar. It's sweet, but also quite different from what we might have expected for his character. Joyce and Hopper were engaged, properly engaged, planning to move away together, start fresh somewhere that didn't have quite so much trauma attached to it. They seemed content, which after everything they'd been through felt earned. The younger kids, our main party, were all moving on too. Max had woken from her coma apparently, and she and Lucas were together, going on proper dates. Dustin seemed to be doing all right, though there was no mention of Susie, his girlfriend from previous seasons, which struck some people as odd. Will had come out to his friends and family, which was a lovely moment, but the specifics of what he said would later become evidence for the theory we're discussing tonight. And Mike was the one telling everyone that 11 was alive. During the final scene, when the party gathered for one last Dungeons and Dragons campaign, Mike narrated a story where 11 had survived, where she was living off the grid somewhere, safe and hidden, but definitely alive. Whether this was true or just a story Mike was telling himself, the finale left deliberately ambiguous. The whole epilogue had this golden, soft-focused quality to it. Everyone looked happy. Everyone looked settled. Everyone had moved on from the horrors they'd experienced. It was, in many ways, exactly the kind of ending you'd expect from a show like this. The heroes win. They grow up. They get their lives back. Except it all felt a bit too neat. A bit too perfect. A bit too conformist. Loads of fans walked away from the finale feeling unsatisfied. Not because it was a bad ending, necessarily, but because it didn't quite feel like Stranger Things. The show had always been about the weird, the broken, the people who didn't fit into neat boxes. And here was an ending where everyone fit into very neat boxes indeed. Some people loved it. They thought it was bittersweet and beautiful, a proper send-off after a decade of chaos. But others started looking closer. They started noticing things that didn't quite add up. Little inconsistencies, strange visual choices, dialogue that felt slightly off. And that's how Conformity Gate was born. Now, the theory that's taken over the internet is called Conformity Gate. And honestly, it's quite brilliant in concept, regardless of whether it's actually true. The term itself was coined by a user on X, formerly Twitter, who goes by the handle at 67gate. They were one of the first people to give this movement a proper name, something that could trend, something that could unite all the scattered observations people were making. And trend it did. Within about 48 hours of the finale dropping, Conformity Gate was everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Reddit, Tumblr. It absolutely exploded. But the groundwork for the theory actually came from someone else. A TikTok user called @Amphibia account was among the first to lay out a comprehensive case for why the finale might not be what it seemed. They created this really detailed video connecting inconsistencies, symbolism, and release patterns into a single narrative. It was compelling stuff, and it got millions of views almost immediately. So what's the actual theory? At its core, Conformity Gate suggests that the final 40 minutes of the Stranger Things finale, the entire epilogue, is a fabricated reality created by Vecna. That Jamie Campbell Bower's character didn't actually die when Joyce beheaded him. Instead, he won. He completed his mission, which was never just to destroy the world, but to remake it in his image, to impose order and control on chaos. According to the theory, everyone we saw in that epilogue, all our favourite characters, are currently trapped in a Vecna-created illusion. They're in a trance, similar to the trances we've seen Vecna put his victims in throughout the series. They think they've won, they think they're living normal, happy lives, but actually they're all still under his control. The name Conformity Gate is particularly clever because it ties directly into the show's themes. Stranger Things has always been about outsiders, about people who don't fit in, about defying expectations and societal norms. The party members were all misfits in one way or another. 11 was literally experimented on and hunted. Will was sensitive and artistic in a way that made him a target for bullies. Mike was a nerd. Dustin had a medical condition. Lucas faced racism. Max dealt with an abusive home life. These weren't kids who conformed to what society wanted them to be. And yet, in the epilogue, everyone's conforming beautifully. Nancy's a journalist, which is what everyone expected. Steve's a teacher and coach, fitting into a respectable community role. Joyce and Hopper are getting married and moving to the suburbs. The kids are graduating, going to college, pursuing normal paths. It's all very ordinary, very safe, very conformist. That's what bothers people. The characters spent 10 years fighting against conformity, against the idea that they had to be normal or fit in. And then the finale puts them all in these perfect little boxes. Now you might say, that's just what growing up looks like. People mature, they settle down, they find their place in the world, and that's a fair point, honestly. But the theory argues that this isn't natural growth, it's forced conformity. It's Vecna's version of a happy ending, where everyone behaves exactly as he thinks they should, where everyone accepts the reality he's created for them. The theory also points out that we've seen Vecna do this before. Throughout season 4 and 5, we saw him trap people in false realities based on their memories and desires. He showed them what they wanted to see, or what he thought they deserved. Max saw herself in a normal, happy version of her life before Billy died. Other victims experienced similar illusions tailored to their specific traumas and hopes. What if the epilogue is just that? A mass illusion, carefully crafted to keep everyone pacified. The theory goes further, suggesting that there's a secret 9th episode that will reveal the truth. That Netflix and the Duffer Brothers have pulled off this massive conspiracy, creating a fake ending to trick the audience just as Vecna tricked the characters. And this supposed 9th episode, this real finale, would drop today. January 7th, 2026. Now, I know how that sounds. It sounds absolutely mental. It sounds like the kind of thing that happens when a fandom can't accept that their show is over. And maybe that's all it is. Maybe Conformity Gate is just collective denial dressed up as detective work. But here's the thing. The evidence people have compiled, some of it is genuinely difficult to explain away. We're not talking about a few random coincidences. We're talking about dozens of specific, detailed observations that all seem to point in the same direction. Fans have created spreadsheets, Google Docs, video compilations, and Reddit threads that run into the thousands of comments. There's a Change.org petition demanding the release of this supposed 9th episode that's gotten over 378,000 signatures. That's not a small group of obsessed fans. That's a movement. And the fascinating thing is, whether the theory is true or not, it's already accomplished something remarkable. It's got people talking about television storytelling, about the relationship between creators and audience, about how we interpret ambiguous endings. It's sparked this massive conversation about what we expect from finales and whether it's okay for shows to challenge those expectations. Conformity Gate is either the most elaborate act of collective delusion in recent fandom history, or it's one of the cleverest narrative tricks ever pulled on a television audience. So that's the basic premise. But the evidence? That's where things get properly interesting. So why today, January 7th, 2026? Why are hundreds of thousands of people convinced something's dropping specifically today? Let's start with the holiday pattern, because this is actually quite compelling when you lay it out. Stranger Things, Season 5 was released in volumes, similar to how they'd done previous seasons. Volume 1 dropped on November 26th, 2025. That's the day before Thanksgiving in the United States. Already, we're starting on a major holiday. Volume 2 came out on Christmas Day, December 25th. Again, massive holiday. Arguably, the biggest one of the year for a lot of people. And then the finale, Episode 8, The Right Side Up, dropped on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2025. 3 major releases, 3 major holidays. That's not coincidence, that's a deliberate pattern. So if you're following that logic, what comes next? Well, January 7th is Orthodox Christmas. It's celebrated by millions of people around the world who follow the Orthodox Christian calendar. And it's exactly 7 days after the finale was released. Now, the Duffer Brothers, Matt and Ross, did this interview before Volume 2 came out, where they said something that's become a bit infamous in the Conformity Gate community. They said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that it was going to be a dark Christmas. Those were the words they used. A dark Christmas. Except nothing particularly dark happened on Christmas Day. Volume 2 was intense, sure, but nobody major died. The tone wasn't significantly darker than what we'd already seen. Fans were confused about what the Duffers meant by that comment. Why specifically say dark Christmas if Christmas itself wasn't especially dark? Unless they weren't talking about December 25th. Unless they were talking about Orthodox Christmas, January 7th, today. That's the theory anyway. The Duffers were dropping a hint, telling us that the real darkness, the real twist would come on the other Christmas. The one most people in Western audiences wouldn't immediately think about. But the January 7th connection goes deeper than just holidays. It's also about the number 7 itself, which appears constantly throughout Stranger Things Season 5. Some of this is pretty undeniable symbolism. Let's go back to the very beginning of Stranger Things. Season 1, Episode 1, the first scene with the party. They're in Mike's basement playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's a campaign run by Mike, and Will Byers is about to make a crucial role. He needs to defeat the Demogorgon. He picks up the dice, he rolls, and what comes up? 7. Will looks at the dice and says, "The Demogorgon, it got me." That 7 wasn't enough. The Demogorgon won. And then, in the very next scene, Will disappears into the Upside Down for the first time, beginning the entire story. Will was missing for 7 days in that first season. 7 days of Joyce frantically searching, of the party trying to find their friend, of everyone thinking he might be dead. 7 days before they finally brought him back. Fast forward to the finale of Season 5. The very last shot before the credits roll shows Mike, Will, Dustin, Lucas and Max playing D&D again. And there's the dice on the table prominently featured. The number showing? 7. Right there, front and centre. It's a full circle moment. The show started with a 7 on the dice. It ends with a 7 on the dice. Or does it? If conformity gate is real, maybe that 7 isn't an ending. Maybe it's instructions. Maybe it's telling us to wait 7 days. 7 days from December 31st brings us to today, January 7th. But there's more. Throughout Season 5, the number 7 keeps popping up. Vecna's curse, the way his powers work, there are references to things taking 7 days to complete. Time works differently in the Upside Down, but 7 remains significant. Fans have counted, and depending on how you interpret certain scenes, there are dozens of instances where 7 appears as a number, a time frame, or a visual element. Some people think that's just pattern recognition, seeing 7s everywhere, because we're looking for them. And fair enough, that's possible. But when you're talking about a show as meticulously crafted as Stranger Things, where the Duffer Brothers have proven time and again that they love Easter eggs and hidden meanings, it's hard to dismiss entirely. Now, Netflix themselves haven't exactly discouraged the speculation. In fact, they've fed into it, intentionally or not. On December 28th, Netflix's main account posted something cryptic on social media. It was an image with the date January 7th and the caption, "Your future is on the way." Conformity Gate believers immediately jumped on this. They took it as confirmation that something was dropping on the 7th. And to be fair, Netflix did announce that they'd be making a big announcement on January 7th about their upcoming 2026 slate. New shows, returning shows, that sort of thing. But here's where it gets interesting. Why would Netflix hype up January 7th so much for just a regular slate announcement? They do those all the time without this level of teasing. Why make it feel like an event, unless there's something bigger hiding in there? Unless there's a surprise drop hidden among the announcements. Or, alternatively, Netflix is just good at marketing, and they know that building anticipation gets people talking. Which, to be fair, they're absolutely right about. We're all talking about it. There's also the fact that Netflix has surprise-dropped content before. They've done secret releases, they've pulled marketing stunts. It's not outside the realm of possibility that they'd hide a secret finale episode in plain sight, announce it alongside other content, and blow everyone's minds. The January 7th connection is probably the strongest pillar holding up the conformity gate theory. It's not just one coincidence, it's multiple data points all aligning on the same date. Orthodox Christmas. 7 days after the finale, the Duffers' dark Christmas comment, the number 7 throughout the show, Netflix is teasing. All of it points here. So yeah, January 7th isn't just a random date someone pulled out of thin air. There's proper logic behind it. Whether that logic is sound or just coincidence dressed up as prophecy, well, that's what we're all waiting to find out. Let's talk about the graduation scene, because honestly, it's where loads of the evidence starts piling up in a way that's genuinely difficult to dismiss. The graduation happens during the epilogue, 18 months after Vecna's supposed defeat. It's meant to be this lovely, bittersweet moment. Will, Mike, Lucas, Dustin, and Max are all graduating from Hawkins High together, the class of 1989. They're moving on, growing up, getting ready to start the next chapter of their lives. It should feel triumphant and earned after everything they've been through. Instead, fans have spotted so many odd details in this scene that it's become one of the main pieces of evidence for the theory. First, there's the graduation gowns. In the epilogue, all the students are wearing bright orange caps and gowns. Not just our main characters, but every single graduate visible in the scene. Bright, unmissable orange. Now, if you're a casual viewer, you might not think twice about that. Orange is a colour. Graduation gowns come in different colours. What's the big deal? But here's the thing. In Stranger Things canon, according to official tie-in materials, Hawkins High's graduation gowns are green. There's a book called One Way or Another by Caitlin Schneiderhan, which is an official Stranger Things novel. It focuses on Nancy Wheeler and follows her through her time at Hawkins High. In that book, there's a scene where Nancy is preparing for her own graduation, which would have been just a few years before Will and Mike's class. She specifically describes the graduation gowns as green. The hideous green fabric is how she puts it. She talks about how slick the polyester felt, how she wasn't fond of the colour but wore it anyway. So Hawkins High has green gowns. That's canon. That's established. And yet in the finale, everyone's wearing orange. Why would that change in just a few years? Schools don't typically switch up their graduation regalia randomly. These things tend to stay consistent for decades. Some fans think this was just a production error, that someone on the costume team simply forgot or didn't check the reference materials. But Stranger Things is an absolutely massive production with meticulous attention to detail. The costume department has won awards. The idea that they'd accidentally get something this significant wrong feels unlikely. So if it's not an error, what is it? Well, the colour orange has some interesting symbolism. In colour psychology and media analysis, orange can represent warning, caution, and deceit. It's also the colour most strongly associated with prisoners. Orange jumpsuits, orange uniforms, that's what prison inmates wear. And when you look at the overhead shot of the graduation ceremony, that's exactly what it looks like. All those students sitting in neat rows in their orange gowns, they look like prisoners, like they're contained, controlled, regimented. It's not a celebration of freedom, it looks like a display of captivity. There's another detail too. In the program that Ted Wheeler is holding during the ceremony, if you look closely, the graduation cap printed on the cover is green, not orange. Green. So even within the same scene, there's an inconsistency. The official program shows one colour, but everyone's actually wearing another. That's the kind of detail that fans argue is deliberately planted. A clue that something's wrong with this reality. But the orange gowns aren't even the most disturbing part of the graduation scene. It's the way everyone's sitting. Every single student in that ceremony, from what we can see, has their hands clasped in front of them in exactly the same position. Not just similar, not just generally the same posture, but identical. Hands folded, resting in their laps, fingers interlaced. It's this very specific, very controlled pose, and it's the exact way Henry Creel sits and stands throughout the series. If you go back and watch scenes with Jamie Campbell Bower as Henry, as Vecna, as One, you'll notice he has this very distinct posture. His hands are always positioned just so, clasped together, fingers laced. It's part of his character design, part of what makes him unsettling. He's too controlled, too precise in his movements. Now look at the graduation. Every student is mimicking that exact posture. It's not just our main characters, though they're certainly doing it too. It's every graduate we can see. And if you look even closer at the people sitting in the bleachers watching the ceremony, they're doing it as well. Parents, teachers, community members. Everyone has their hands in the Henry Creel position. The odds of that happening naturally, of everyone at a graduation ceremony sitting in exactly the same way, are basically zero. People sit however they're comfortable. Some slouch, some sit up straight, some cross their arms, some put their hands on their knees. Variety is normal. Uniformity like this, that's not normal. That's control. It looks exactly like what you'd expect if Vecna had everyone in his thrall. Everyone conforming to his posture, his way of being, his imposed order on the world. There's also something going on with the Wheeler family specifically. In the epilogue, Nancy, Mike, and their mother Karen all have very similar haircuts. They're all sporting these short, neat styles that weren't what they had before. And multiple fans have pointed out that these haircuts look remarkably similar to Henry Creel's hair. Now this one, I'll admit, feels like a bit of a stretch. Hair is hair, people change their styles, and not every short haircut is significant. But when you're looking at all these details together, it adds to the overall sense that something's off, that everyone's being subtly shaped to fit a specific aesthetic, a specific vision of what they should look like. The graduation scene is also just too orderly, too perfect. Graduations are typically a bit chaotic, especially for teenagers. People are excited, they're emotional, they're fidgeting and whispering and barely containing their energy. This graduation looks like everyone's been sedated. Everyone's calm, composed, sitting perfectly still. It's got this eerie Stepford Wives quality to it. And remember, this is supposed to be 1989 Hawkins, Indiana, a small town that's been through absolute hell, a town where multiple people have died, where the upside down broke through repeatedly, where everyone knows something deeply wrong has been happening even if they don't fully understand it. You'd expect people to still be processing trauma, to be anxious, to be anything other than this placid. Instead, everyone looks content. Everyone looks like they've accepted this new reality without question. That's what Conformity Gate is about. Not rebellion, not resistance, but acceptance. Everyone conforming to the new normal that's been created for them. I'll be honest, the graduation scene is one of the strongest pieces of evidence in the theory. The orange gowns, the identical postures, the overall atmosphere of controlled calm. It's all just a bit too perfect, a bit too off. And for a show that's always been about the weird and the wrong, having something feel this deliberately incorrect seems significant. Whether it's brilliant foreshadowing or unfortunate production choices, the graduation scene has given Conformity Gate believers loads to work with. And we're only just getting started. Now, here's something that's genuinely quite creepy when you notice it. Exit signs. Red exit signs, to be specific, and they're everywhere in the epilogue. This is one of those details that you might not catch on a first viewing, but once someone points it out, you can't unsee it. Throughout those final happy moments, those flash-forward scenes showing our characters living their new lives, there's almost always a red exit sign somewhere in the frame. Let's go through them. Will has a scene where he's on a date at a bar. He's finally comfortable in his identity, finally open about who he is, and he's meeting someone. It's meant to be this sweet, affirming moment, and in the background of that shot, clear as day, there's a red exit sign. Joyce and Hopper have a date scene as well. They're at a restaurant, looking loved up and content, discussing their future together. They're engaged, they're planning to leave Hawkins, everything seems perfect. And behind them, red exit sign. Max and Lucas go on a date too. Max has recovered from her coma. She and Lucas are together properly now, and they're just being normal teenagers for once. They're at what looks like a diner or cafe. And yes, you guessed it, there's a red exit sign visible in the shot. 3 major romantic scenes. 3 happy endings for characters we care about. 3 dates. 3 red exit signs. That's not random placement. That's deliberate cinematography. Now, you might argue that exit signs are just a normal part of any public building. Restaurants and bars are required to have them for safety reasons. They're ubiquitous in modern life, so of course they'd show up in scenes filmed in these locations. Fair point, and I'm not going to pretend that's not true. But here's the thing about filmmaking. Directors and cinematographers have complete control over framing. If an exit sign is going to be visible in a shot, that's a choice. They can adjust the angle, reposition the actors, frame the scene differently. The fact that these signs are not only present, but prominently visible in multiple key scenes suggests intentionality. And then there's what those exit signs might represent. The symbolism is pretty on the nose, honestly. An exit sign tells you how to leave. It's a way out. It's a signal that you're in a constructed space and there's a door that leads back to reality. The comparison loads of fans have made is to The Truman Show, that film from 1998, where Jim Carrey's character lives his entire life in a massive television set without knowing it. Throughout that film, there are subtle visual cues that hint at the artificiality of Truman's world. Things that seem normal at first but on closer inspection reveal the constructed nature of his reality. The exit signs in Stranger Things could be functioning the same way. They're visual prompts, messages to both the characters and the audience that this reality has an escape route, that you can leave if you know how, that this isn't the real world, it's a constructed space that you're meant to exit from. In The Truman Show, Truman eventually realizes his world is fake and literally exits through a door in the sky. He walks out of his false reality and into the real one. Is that what the exit signs are suggesting? That our characters could leave this false epilogue if they realized it wasn't real? What makes this particularly compelling is that Vecna's powers throughout the series have been all about creating false realities. When he takes control of someone, he traps them in a mental prison based on their memories and fears. We've seen multiple characters stuck in these Vecna-created spaces, and the way they escape is always by recognizing something that's wrong, something that doesn't belong. Max escaped Vecna's first attempt on her life by recognizing her favorite song. Music became her exit sign, her way out. Holly Wheeler, in Season 5, escaped Vecna's mindscape by noticing that part of a merry-go-round was the wrong colour. These small inconsistencies, these clues that reality isn't what it seems, that's how you break free. So maybe these literal exit signs are the equivalent for the epilogue. They're the visual inconsistency, the thing that's slightly off, the clue that tells you this isn't real. The characters in the scenes don't seem to notice them, don't seem to register their significance, but we, the audience, are meant to see them. We're meant to recognise them as signals. Or, and I want to be balanced here, maybe they're just exit signs. Maybe the production team filmed in locations that happen to have them, and there's no deeper meaning. Maybe fans are doing what fans do, which is finding patterns and significance in ordinary details. But taken together with everything else, with the orange gowns and the hand positions, and the number 7 and the January 7th date, the exit signs add to this mounting pile of evidence that something's deliberately wrong with the epilogue. That we're being shown a false reality and given clues to figure that out. The exit signs say, this isn't where you belong, there's a way out, you just have to see it. And if that's the message the Duffers are trying to send, it's working. Loads of people are looking for the exit, so one of the most compelling pieces of evidence, and honestly, one I can't really explain away easily, is the voltage dial. This is the detail that converted a lot of skeptics into believers, or at least into people who think there might be something to this theory. The voltage dial is located at the WSQK radio station. That's the station that Robin and Steve work at during Season 5, and it features pretty prominently in the final volume. The radio tower itself becomes important to the plot. There are multiple scenes filmed there, and we get good, clear shots of the equipment. Now here's where it gets interesting. In Episode 1, when we first see the voltage dial on the equipment at the radio station, it's a specific colour. Depending on who you ask and which screenshot they're looking at, it's either red or a dark grey. There's some debate about the exact shade, but everyone agrees on what it looks like in that first appearance. Then in Episode 8, the finale, we see the voltage dial again. Same piece of equipment, same radio station. Except now it's a completely different colour. If it was grey before, it's red now. If it was red before, it's grey now. The point is it's changed, and this isn't something in the background that you might miss. This is equipment that's featured in the frame, that characters interact with. It's not a blink and you'll miss it detail. It's right there. Now, continuity errors happen in television production all the time. Props get replaced, things get repainted, mistakes occur. Anyone who's ever watched a show closely knows that drinks change levels between shots, shirts change colour, hair goes from neat to messy, and back again. It's part of the reality of filmmaking. You're shooting over months, sometimes years, things change. But here's what makes the voltage dial different. First, it's not just a prop that exists in the world, it's something the characters, specifically, interact with. Robin is shown using this equipment, adjusting things, working with the controls. It's plot relevant. Second, WSQK isn't a real location they're filming at. It's a set built specifically for Stranger Things. That means every single piece of equipment in that radio station was sourced, chosen, or created by the production team. When you build a set from scratch, you have control over everything. You're not dealing with whatever happens to be in a real location. You're making deliberate choices about what goes where. If you need multiple versions of the same prop, maybe for backup or because something breaks, you make sure they match. That's basic continuity management. So for a featured piece of equipment, something that's going to be in multiple episodes, to change colours? That's weird. That's the kind of thing that production designers and continuity supervisors are specifically hired to prevent. Unless it's not a mistake, unless it's deliberate. This is where the theory really gains weight, because we've seen this exact technique used before in Stranger Things. We know how it works, we know what it means. Back in the upside-down sequences, particularly in Season 5 when Holly Wheeler and Max are trapped in Vecna's mindscape, the show established a very specific visual language for how you escape. You look for things that are wrong, things that don't match your memory of reality, small inconsistencies that reveal the false nature of what you're experiencing. Holly noticed that a merry-go-round was the wrong colour. In the real world, in her actual memories, the merry-go-round in the playground was yellow. But in Vecna's version, in the mental prison he created, it was grey. That colour change, that inconsistency, was her clue. That's how she knew something was wrong. That's what allowed her to start breaking free. Max had similar experiences. When she was trapped in Vecna's mindscape, there were small details that didn't quite match reality, things that her subconscious recognized as false even when her conscious mind was fooled. This is an established part of how Vecna's powers work. He creates incredibly detailed illusions, but they're not perfect. There are always small tells, small glitches in the matrix, and the way you escape is by noticing them, by recognizing that something's off. So when the voltage dial changes colours between episodes, Conformity Gate believers see it as exactly the same kind of clue. It's the show telling us, the audience, that what we're watching isn't real. It's a Vecna-created illusion. And here's your proof. Here's your merry-go-round. Here's your inconsistency. The parallel is almost too perfect to be coincidence. The show spent time establishing that colour changes in objects are how you recognise Vecna's illusions, and then there's a prominent colour change in the finale. Either that's the most unfortunate continuity error possible, or it's a massive clue. Reddit has been all over this one. There's a user called Hawkins Field Notes who put it quite well. A prop changing like that accidentally is insane to me. They're right, it is insane. Television productions have continuity supervisors whose entire job is to make sure things like this don't happen. They take photos between takes and between shooting days specifically to ensure consistency. For something this noticeable to slip through on accident would require multiple people to miss it. The prop department would have to not notice they'd built or sourced a different version. The continuity supervisor would have to miss it in their checks. The director would have to not see it while filming. The editor would have to not catch it while cutting the scenes together. And all the producers, executives, and quality control people who review episodes before they air would have to miss it too. That's a lot of people all failing to do their jobs simultaneously. Which isn't impossible, but it's definitely improbable. Or it's not a failure at all. It's an intentional choice, a planted clue, a breadcrumb leading us to the truth that the finale isn't real. The voltage dial is probably the single most compelling piece of visual evidence for Conformity Gate. It's specific, it's noticeable, it's hard to dismiss, and it connects directly to established law about how Vecna's powers work. When I think about evidence that makes me go, Okay, maybe there's something here. The voltage dial is at the top of that list. Of course, there's always the possibility that it really is just a mistake, that someone on the production team had a bad day, that wires got crossed, that the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. It happens. Even on the best shows with the biggest budgets, mistakes make it to air. But this one bothers me. This one feels like it should have been caught if it was a mistake. And the fact that it mirrors the exact technique the show established for recognizing Vecna's illusions makes it feel less like accident and more like intention. So, yeah, the voltage dial. That's the one piece of evidence that keeps me from dismissing Conformity Gate entirely. Now let's talk about WSQK, because honestly, this is where things get a bit wild, a bit properly mental if I'm being honest. WSQK is the radio station that features in Season 5. Robin and Steve end up working there, it becomes an important location, and the radio station itself plays a role in the plot. But what loads of people don't know is that WSQK wasn't just a fictional station you saw on screen. It was real. Netflix actually created a functioning radio station that fans could listen to. During the lead up to Season 5's release, you could actually tune into WSQK online and hear it broadcasting. It played 80s music, it had commercials and station identification, and crucially, it had hosts. 2 hosts, specifically, named Vance and Mindy Flair. And that's where things start getting weird. If you rearrange the letters in Vance, you get Vecna. And if you rearrange the letters in Mindy Flair, you get Mind Flayer. Now, on its own, that could be a coincidence. Vance and Vecna aren't perfect anagrams, but they're close enough that people noticed. And Mindy Flair to Mind Flayer is a bit more of a stretch. You have to work the letters around, but it's doable. But here's the thing. Why would Netflix choose those specific names? They could have called the hosts anything. Steve and Karen, Bob and Linda, Rick and Morty for all I care. Any names would have worked. But they specifically chose names that, when rearranged, become the 2 main antagonists of Stranger Things. That feels intentional. That feels like a message. And it gets weirder when you look at what Mindy and Vance actually said during their broadcasts. There's dialogue from the WSQK station that fans have transcribed and analysed, and some of it is unsettling. At one point, Mindy talks about controlling the audience. Her exact words were something along the lines of, "I know exactly what you want to hear. It's like I'm reading your mind, and the tune you're thinking about, I'm going to play it next. Don't go anywhere, I'm controlling you now too." That's not normal radio banter. That's not, "Here's a great song coming up next." That's a direct statement about control and mind reading, about having power over the listeners. And you know who else controls people's minds? Vecna. That's literally his entire thing. There's another bit where Mindy refers to herself as the queen at the controls. Not just a DJ, not just a host, but a queen. Someone with power, someone in charge. And right before that line, both hosts talk about taking over the town. Mindy Flair, Mind Flayer. The queen at the controls, taking over the town. Controlling the audience. If this is all just cheeky Easter egg fun from Netflix, it's incredibly on the nose. But Conformity Gate believers think it's more than that. They think the WSQK broadcasts were part of the story, part of the clue trail leading to the revelation that the epilogue is false. There's also some audio weirdness with WSQK that fans have picked up on. During one of the broadcasts, there was static and interference. Someone took that audio file and enhanced it, filtered it, cleaned it up. And according to them, you can hear a voice in the static saying, "You need to wake up." Now, I haven't personally heard this myself, and audio analysis can be tricky. People hear what they want to hear, especially when you're looking for hidden messages. It could be pareidolia, which is the phenomenon where you perceive patterns in random data, like seeing faces in clouds or hearing words in white noise. But if that phrase is actually there, if "you need to wake up" is hidden in the WSQK broadcast static, that's enormous. That's a direct message telling the audience that what they're seeing isn't real, that they need to snap out of it. There are other WSQK details that fans have catalogued. Mentions of 6 weeks, right before the Vecna clock chimes in one broadcast. Discussion about locks and gates being closed. References to every voice, every song, every moment on this frequency travelled outward, spreading, connecting, becoming something larger. That last one is particularly interesting because it sounds an awful lot like how the mind flayer operates. It's a hive mind, a collective consciousness that spreads and connects and consumes, everything becoming part of something larger. That's exactly what the mind flayer does. And then there's what Mindy says in the final broadcast, and you're not listening alone. You never were. Which on one level is just saying that lots of people listen to the radio, but on another level, in the context of all these other clues, it suggests that there's something else listening, something else present. Vecna, perhaps, the mind flayer. Something that's always been there, always been watching and listening and controlling. Will's necklace in the epilogue has also been connected to the WSQK broadcasts. Apparently, the necklace looks like a lock, and the WSQK hosts talked about locks and gates. Mike was described as the key earlier in the season. So you've got locks, keys, gates, and doors all being referenced. And the final shot of episode 8 is literally a closed door. Is this all connected? Are the WSQK broadcasts telling a story about being locked in an illusion, about needing a key to escape, about gates and doors and exits? Or is it just fun flavor content that Netflix created to enhance the viewing experience? And fans are reading way too much into deliberate Easter eggs that were never meant to be part of a conspiracy theory. I genuinely don't know. WSQK is one of the aspects of Conformity Gate where I can see it going either way. On one hand, the anagram names are really specific, and the dialogue about control is undeniably creepy when you think about it in context. On the other hand, Netflix loves doing immersive marketing experiences, and this could just be exactly that. A fun immersive experience that's been swept up into a larger theory. What I will say is this: if WSQK is meant to be part of the clue trail, it's brilliant. It's transmedia storytelling at its finest, using a real radio station with real broadcasts that fans could actually listen to plant clues about the nature of the show's reality. That would be ambitious and creative, and exactly the kind of thing the Duffers would think was clever. So WSQK is either the most elaborate Easter egg ever created for a Netflix show, or it's literally broadcasting the truth that everyone's trapped in Vecna's illusion and we need to wake up. Take your pick. So here's where things get a bit more subjective, but also kind of damning in its own way. Character behaviour, specifically characters acting in ways that don't quite match who they are, or characters who should be present but mysteriously aren't. Let's start with the biggest one, the one that bothers loads of people, Jim Hopper. Throughout the entire series, Hopper's defining characteristic, beyond being a tough sheriff with a soft heart, is his absolute devotion to protecting Eleven. She's not just someone he cares about, she's his daughter in every way that matters. He adopted her, he raised her, he was willing to sacrifice everything for her multiple times. In season 3, Hopper apparently died to close the gate and protect Eleven and everyone else. Except he didn't die, he ended up in Russia, and the entire reason he survived, the entire reason he fought through hell to get back, was to get home to Eleven. That relationship, that bond, is the emotional core of Hopper's character. So when Eleven apparently sacrifices herself at the end of the finale, staying behind as the Upside Down collapses, you'd expect Hopper to be destroyed. You'd expect him to be going out of his mind with grief. This is his daughter. This is the person he spent years protecting, and now she's gone. Except in the epilogue, 18 months later, Hopper seems fine. He's engaged to Joyce. He's making plans to move away from Hawkins. He's looking forward to the future. There's no visible grief, no ongoing trauma, no sign that he's struggling with the loss of his daughter. And it's not like Joyce is trying to help him through it either. She's not comforting him or supporting him through his grief, because there doesn't appear to be any grief to support. They both just seem to have moved on. That doesn't track. That's not consistent with who Hopper is as a character. Losing Eleven would break him. It would be like losing Sarah, his biological daughter, who died when she was young, all over again. That trauma defined Hopper for years. He became an alcoholic, His marriage fell apart. He could barely function. And that was with a child he'd had for only a few years. 11 is different. He's had longer with her. Their bond is deeper, and she represents his redemption. She's proof that he could be a good father, that he could protect someone, that he wasn't a complete failure. Losing her would shatter him. But in the epilogue, he's fine. He's moved on. He's planning a future. Unless he hasn't actually lost her. Unless on some level, he knows she's not really gone, because none of this is real. Then there's the case of the missing characters, specifically Vicky and Susie. Vicky was a major part of Robin's arc in season 5. There was this whole building romance between them, scenes of them connecting, hints that they were going to end up together. And then in the epilogue, Vicky is just gone. Not mentioned, not shown, completely absent from Robin's life. Robin is shown having moved away for college, which is great for her, but there's no indication that Vicky is part of that future. Did they break up off screen? Did Vicky just cease to exist? We don't know, because the show doesn't address it. And then there's Susie, Dustin's girlfriend. She was introduced in season 3, showed up in season 4, was a whole character with personality and plot relevance. Dustin and Susie had this long-distance relationship that was sweet and geeky and very much part of Dustin's character development. In season 5, Susie is barely present, and according to the Duffers, in interviews after the finale, Dustin and Susie broke up off screen between seasons. Just ended things, moved on, no big deal. Except for a relationship that was built up over multiple seasons that seems like a pretty significant development to hand-wave away with they broke up off screen. And in the epilogue, there's no mention of Susie at all. Dustin seems fine. He's graduating with his friends, moving on with his life. Now here's where Conformity Gate gets clever. The theory suggests that Vecna can only create illusions based on memories and knowledge he actually has. He can only recreate people and places he's encountered or knows about. And crucially, Vecna never met Vicky. He never met Susie. Those characters weren't around during any of Vecna's encounters with the main party. He wouldn't have the information needed to include them in his illusion. So in the epilogue, in this false reality he's created, they simply don't exist. They're absent because Vecna doesn't know they should be there. It's like when you dream about your life, but certain people are missing because your brain hasn't included them in that particular dream construction. The gaps, the absences, are revealing. Now let's talk about Will specifically, because there's some dialogue in his scenes that's got people properly worried. Will has his coming out conversation in the epilogue, which is a lovely moment. He talks to his friends and family about his sexuality, about who he is, and everyone's supportive. It's handled well, it feels earned. But then Will starts talking about things he enjoys, things that make him happy. And he mentions liking to go into the woods. Will Byers, whose entire trauma, whose entire nightmare began when he was chased through the woods by the Demogorgon, who spent 7 days trapped in the Upside Down after being taken from near those woods, who has spent the entire series being haunted by memories of what happened to him in the woods. That Will says he enjoys going into the woods. That's not something Will would say. That's not something that makes sense for his character. The woods represent terror for Will. They represent the worst thing that ever happened to him. Even if he's worked through his trauma, even if he's in therapy, you don't typically develop a fondness for the specific location of your worst nightmare. Unless that's not really Will talking. Unless that's Vecna's version of Will, based on what Vecna thinks a normal teenager would say. There's another bit where Will mentions enjoying milkshakes from Melvald's. Now Melvald's is a real location in Hawkins. We've seen it throughout the series, but it's a general store, a hardware shop. It doesn't serve milkshakes. It's not a restaurant or a diner. However, and this is where it gets interesting, Melvald's might have served milkshakes or had a soda fountain back in the 1950s when Henry Creel was young. It was common for general stores to have small lunch counters back then. So Henry might have memories of getting milkshakes at Melvald's from his childhood. But Will wouldn't, because by the time Will was growing up, Melvald's hadn't served food for decades. So why would he mention it? Unless he's speaking from Henry's memories, not his own. These little slips, these moments where characters say things that don't quite match their experiences, that's what has conformity gate believers convinced that the epilogue isn't real. The characters are slightly off, slightly wrong, like copies made by someone who doesn't quite understand the originals. And then there's Steve Harrington, former popular kid, former hair model, current defender of middle schoolers. In the epilogue, Steve is shown to be a baseball coach at Hawkins High. He's teaching, he's coaching, he's found his calling. But here's the thing. Throughout the entire series, the only time we see Steve using a baseball bat is as a weapon. He famously has his nail-studded bat that he uses to fight demogorgons and other creatures. He's seen with a baseball bat by Vecna during their confrontations. But Steve was never actually into baseball as a sport. He was a basketball player. That was his sport at school, not baseball, basketball. So why would he become a baseball coach? Unless that's what Vecna thinks Steve should be based on seeing him with a bat. Unless Vecna is creating those futures based on surface-level observations rather than deep character knowledge. It's all just slightly off. Everyone's slightly wrong. Like a photocopy of a photocopy where details get lost or distorted in the reproduction. Either the duffers just forgot or didn't care about some of these character details, which is possible but disappointing, or it's all intentional. It's all meant to signal that this reality isn't right, that these aren't really our characters living their true lives. Character inconsistencies are harder to prove than visual clues like the voltage dial or the orange gowns. They're more subjective, more open to interpretation. But when you pile them all up, when you look at all these moments where characters don't quite behave like themselves, it starts to feel like a pattern rather than coincidence. Now, this is where conformity gate gets properly meta, because there are moments in Season 5 that feel less like storytelling and more like the show is talking directly to us, the audience. Fourth wall breaks, or near enough to them that the line gets blurry. The most obvious one happens in Episode 2. Lucas Sinclair is talking to the group about something. I don't recall the exact context, but at one point he looks directly at the camera. He makes eye contact with us, with the audience, and says, "I don't know about you guys, but I don't believe in coincidences." Now, characters looking at the camera isn't unprecedented in television. Sometimes it's an artistic choice, sometimes it's accidental, sometimes it's deliberately breaking the fourth wall for effect. But Stranger Things hasn't really done that before. It's not that kind of show. It's pretty committed to its reality, to keeping you immersed in the world, rather than reminding you that you're watching a television program. So when Lucas does it, when he looks right at us and says he doesn't believe in coincidences, it feels significant. It feels like he's talking to the audience as much as he's talking to the other characters. And what is conformity gate really, except a theory built on coincidences? All these little details, all these clues, they could all be explained away as individual coincidences. The orange gowns, the hand positions, the voltage dial, the exit signs, the character inconsistencies. Any one of them on its own could be random chance or production error or meaningless choice. But Lucas is telling us not to believe in coincidences. He's telling us to look deeper, to see the pattern, to recognise that all these details add up to something. Is that what the duffers are doing? Using Lucas to speak directly to the audience and tell us we're right to be suspicious? Then there's a conversation in one of the later episodes where Robin is explaining something about Vecna's powers. She's talking about how his victims go into trances, how they become unconscious to the real world while they're trapped in his illusions. And the way the scene is staged, the way the dialogue is delivered, she's essentially explaining the entire conformity gate theory. Robin says something along the lines of, "They're all unconscious, they share that in common." And Mike responds with, "They go into a trance when Vecna captures them." Then Robin continues with, "No wonder everyone was so clueless, it's a trance." And here's the key bit. She's saying this directly to Mike, and Mike, throughout the series, has been positioned as the storyteller. He's the dungeon master, he's the one who creates narratives, he's the one who imagines how things should go. In a lot of ways, Mike represents the audience. He's us or we're him, depending on how you look at it. So Robin is explaining to Mike, who represents the audience, that everyone is in a trance, and that's why they're clueless about what's really happening. She's telling us through Mike that we've been fooled, that we're watching people who are unconscious, who are trapped, who don't realise they're in an illusion. That feels pretty on the nose for a show that's supposedly not trying to hint at a conspiracy theory. And then there's the final Dungeons and Dragons scene. The party gathers one last time to play a campaign, and Mike is the dungeon master. He tells the story of how Eleven survived, how she's living off the grid somewhere, how everything worked out okay. And at the end of his story, he presents an alternate ending. He literally says something like, "But what if it went differently?" He creates an alternate version of events. He rewrites the ending. He shows that the story doesn't have to go the way it initially appeared. Earlier in the season, someone tells Mike, "You don't get to write the ending." I don't remember exactly who or the precise context, but that line was in there. And it felt significant at the time because Mike is always trying to control narratives, always trying to make things fit his vision of how they should be. But then in the finale, Mike does exactly that. He writes the ending. He creates an alternate version of reality through his D&D campaign. Is that what the Duffers are doing? Are they showing us that the ending we saw isn't fixed? That there's an alternate version? That Mike's ability to rewrite the story is a mirror of what's actually happening? There's also the What's It board game that appears in the background of scenes during the epilogue. What's It was the alias that Henry Creel used when he was luring children to their deaths. It was his murder game, essentially, and it's just sitting there in the background of scenes that are supposed to be happy and normal. Why include that? Why put a visual reference to Henry's crimes in scenes that are meant to show everyone moving on and healing? Unless it's meant to remind us that Henry is still present, still controlling things, still playing his game. And then we've got Eddie Munson's line from all the way back in Season 4, Episode 1. During his Dungeons and Dragons campaign, Eddie is describing Vecna, and the party argues that Vecna is dead, that they defeated him. And Eddie responds dramatically, "So it was thought, my friends, so it was thought. But Vecna lives." At the time, that was just Eddie being a dramatic dungeon master, setting up the reveal that Vecna is the villain of the season. But in retrospect, knowing what we know now, it reads differently. It reads like foreshadowing. The characters think Vecna is dead, but he's not. He lives, just like Eddie said. Are all these moments just good storytelling, just the Duffers being clever with their callbacks and metaphors? Or are they literal clues, pieces of a puzzle that reveal the ending isn't what it seems? The meta moments in Stranger Things, Season 5, are some of the most fascinating parts of Conformity Gate because they're so open to interpretation. You can read them as the Duffers being playful with the audience, having fun with the form, or you can read them as direct communication. As the creators telling us, through the characters, that we're right to be suspicious, that there's more to the story, that we should keep looking. It's brilliant storytelling either way, honestly. Even if Conformity Gate is completely wrong, the fact that the show has these layers, these moments that can be read multiple ways, that's what makes it compelling television. Let's talk about Dungeons and Dragons, because for a show that started with a D&D campaign, it's fitting that some of the biggest clues come from the game itself. There's symbolism here that's hard to ignore, whether you believe the theory or not. The most discussed piece of D&D evidence is the book spines. In the final scene, when the party's putting away their Dungeons and Dragons materials after finishing their campaign, we see their binders lined up on a shelf. Each of the main party members has their own binder with their character information, campaign notes, all that sort of thing. When these binders are lined up in order, Max's, Lucas's, Will's, Dustin's and Mike's, the first letters on the spines appear to spell out something. According to loads of fans who've screenshotted and enhanced the image, it spells X a lie. X, A, lie. As in, Dimension X is a lie. The dimension that supposedly got destroyed at the end of the finale, the source of the Upside Down, the origin of all the chaos. It's a lie. It's still there. It was never actually destroyed. And if Dimension X is still intact, then Vecna probably is too. Because Vecna is intrinsically linked to that dimension. Destroying it should have destroyed him. But if it's all a lie, if Dimension X never actually collapsed, then Vecna is still out there, still in control. Now, there is some debate about what the spines actually spell. Some people, when they go back and watch the scene on Netflix themselves, claim it spells Xaile, which isn't a word. So maybe it's not spelling anything. Maybe it's just a coincidence of how the binders happen to line up. Maybe we're seeing patterns that aren't there. But the fact that it's close enough to Xaile for loads of people to see it immediately, that's interesting. Even if it's not exactly that phrase, the fact that our brains interpret it that way suggests the visual design is at least hinting in that direction. And let's talk about the dice. The dice in Dungeons & Dragons aren't just game pieces, they're symbolic. They represent chance, fate, the randomness of life. In the world of the game, the dice determine what happens. The Dungeon Master can set up the scenario, but the dice decide the outcome. Stranger Things started with a dice roll. The very first scene of the very first episode, we're in Mike's basement, watching the party play D&D. Will rolls the dice to fight the Demogorgon. The die bounces off the table and lands on the floor. We see it clearly. 7. Will says, "It got me," and then the campaign ends because Mike's mum calls them upstairs. They never finish that game. They never resolve what happens after Will's 7, and then Will disappears that night. The Demogorgon, in a sense, really did get him. 7. The number that started everything. Fast forward to the finale. The very last shot before the credits is another D&D scene. The party's there again, older now, but still playing. And there's the die on the table, prominently featured in the frame. The number showing, 7. It's a bookend. The show starts with a 7. It ends with a 7. Full circle. Or is it? Because if the epilogue isn't real, if Conformity Gate is correct, then that 7 isn't an ending. It's the same moment. We're still in that incomplete campaign from the first episode. We're still waiting to find out what happens after Will's roll. The story hasn't actually ended, it's just looped back to the beginning. And remember what Will said in that first episode, the Demogorgon, it got me. Maybe it still has. Maybe they're all still got. Maybe none of them ever really escaped. There's another detail about that final D&D scene that's interesting. Next to the dice, there's a book visible. And it's not just any book, it's labelled as a Stranger Things Player's Manual, like an actual game supplement, an instruction book. Which is a bit meta when you think about it. The characters in Stranger Things are looking at a Stranger Things manual. Are they aware they're in a game? Are they aware they're following a script, playing roles, acting out a narrative someone else created? Or is that book there for us, the audience? Are we the players? Are we meant to be studying the manual, figuring out the rules, solving the puzzle? Throughout the final D&D campaign scene, Mike is narrating. He's telling the story of what happened to 11, how she survived, where she might be now. He's creating an ending, a resolution, a way for the story to continue, even though it seems like it's over. And then he does something interesting. He presents an alternate ending. He literally says they could tell the story a different way, that there's another version of events, another way things could have gone. Mike has always been the storyteller of the group. He's the dungeon master. He creates the campaigns, he decides what happens in the game world. And in a lot of ways, Mike is a stand-in for the Duffers themselves. He represents the creative force behind the narrative. So when Mike talks about alternate endings, about different ways the story could go, is that the Duffers talking? Are they telling us that the ending we saw isn't the only one? That there's another version, a different path, a hidden conclusion? The D&D campaign in Stranger Things has always been more than just a framing device. It's been a way to talk about the real action, to parallel what's happening in Hawkins with what's happening in the game. When the characters play D&D, they're often processing their real trauma, their real conflicts, through the metaphor of the game. So that final campaign, where Mike rewrites the ending and suggests alternatives, that's not just about the game. That's about the actual story. That's about Stranger Things itself. And if Mike can rewrite the ending in the game, maybe the Duffers are rewriting the ending of the show. Maybe that's what today is about. Maybe that's what the supposed 9th episode would be. An alternate ending, a different path, the real conclusion that's been hidden all along. The dice say 7. The books spell lies. The manual is there for us to study. And Mike, our surrogate storyteller, is telling us that endings can be rewritten. D&D has always been about imagination, about creating worlds and telling stories. And maybe Stranger Things is asking us to imagine something different, to look beyond the surface, to question what we've been shown, to roll the dice one more time and see what happens. 7. It's where we started, it's where we are now, and maybe it's pointing us toward where we need to go next. So to understand why this theory is called Conformity Gate, we need to talk about what Vecna actually wanted, what his plan was, what his endgame looked like. Because it wasn't just destruction. It was never just about killing people or ending the world. Henry Creel, before he became Vecna, before he became One, was a child who saw the world differently than everyone around him. He saw the darkness in people, the ugliness, the petty cruelties and hypocrisies. And he was told to conform, to pretend he didn't see those things, to act normal, to fit in, to be like everyone else. His parents wanted him to conform to their image of a perfect family. Society wanted him to conform to expectations of how a child should behave. Everyone around him was performing conformity, pretending to be something they weren't, and they wanted him to do the same. And Henry hated it. He hated the falseness, the performance, the way everyone pretended to be good while thinking terrible things. So he rejected it. He embraced his difference, his power, his ability to see through the masks people wore. But here's the interesting bit. As Henry grew older, as he became Vecna, his philosophy shifted. He went from rejecting conformity to imposing it. He decided that the problem with the world wasn't that people were forced to conform. It was that they were conforming to the wrong things. They needed to conform to his vision instead. Vecna's powers are all about control. He doesn't just kill people, he traps them in mental prisons based on their guilt, their trauma, their worst memories. He creates realities for them, shows them specific things, makes them experience particular emotions. He's a puppet master, and everyone else is dancing on his strings. And what does he want? Order. A world shaped according to his design. A world where the chaos is removed, where everything fits into its proper place, where everyone behaves exactly as he thinks they should. That's what the Upside Down represented in a way. It was his version of reality. Twisted and dark, sure, but ordered, structured, under his control. So when we get to the epilogue of Stranger Things, what do we see? Order, structure, control. Everyone fitting into neat little boxes, living predictable lives, conforming to exactly what society expects of them. Nancy becomes a journalist, which is what everyone expected. She's ambitious, she's good with words, of course she'd go into journalism. Mike becomes a writer, a storyteller, because that's what he's always been. Steve becomes a teacher and coach, taking care of kids, which is what he learned to do with the party. Joyce and Hopper get married and plan to move to the suburbs, living out a traditional happy ending. Even the kids, our misfit heroes, are conforming. They graduate on time. They're making plans for college or careers. They're moving forward with their lives in exactly the way society says they should. And it's all so normal, so expected, so conformist. That's what bothers people about the epilogue. These characters spent 10 years being weird, being different, being outsiders. They fought against conformity. They embraced their strangeness. 11 was literally a girl with superpowers who'd been experimented on. You can't get more non-conformist than that. But in the epilogue, everyone's conforming beautifully. There's no resistance, no struggle, no sense that they're still the weird kids who saved the world. They're just normal people living normal lives. And if you think about it from Vecna's perspective, that's exactly what he'd want. Not to destroy these people, but to neutralize them, to take away what made them dangerous to him, which was their ability to think differently, to act unpredictably, to fight back. Put them in a nice, comfortable illusion where they think they've won, where they think they're living happy lives, and they'll stop fighting. They'll conform. They'll accept the reality that's been created for them. It's actually quite brilliant as a villain plan. Vecna's not stupid. He knows that if he just kills everyone, he becomes the villain, the enemy, the thing that must be defeated. But if he creates a reality where everyone thinks they've already won, where everyone is content and settled and convinced that the nightmare is over, then nobody fights back. Nobody questions it. They just live their lives in the cage he's built for them, thinking they're free. Thematically, it makes sense. Stranger Things has always been about the battle between conformity and individuality. The government wanted to weaponize Eleven, to make her conform to their vision of a useful tool. The bullies at school wanted Mike and the gang to conform to social hierarchies. Hawkins itself, as a town, was all about keeping up appearances, conforming to this image of a perfect American small town, even while terrible things happened beneath the surface. And our heroes rejected that. They embraced being different. They found strength in their weirdness. So an ending where they all just conform, where they all fit neatly into society's expectations, that's not a triumph, that's a defeat. That's them losing what made them who they are. Unless it's not real. Unless the conformity is imposed, not chosen. Unless Vecna won by making everyone think they'd won. There's also something to be said about Vecna's face in that final shot. When Joyce supposedly kills him, when she buries the axe in his head, we get a close-up of his face. And some fans, quite a lot of them actually, think he looks satisfied. Not defeated, not terrified, not in pain, satisfied. Like this is exactly what he wanted. Like the plan worked. Now I'll admit reading facial expressions in dramatic death scenes is tricky. Actors are doing a lot with their faces in moments like that. And what looks like satisfaction to one viewer might look like surprise or pain to another. It's subjective. But the fact that loads of people independently came to the same conclusion, that Vecna looks like he's won rather than lost, that's interesting. That suggests there's something in the performance, in the direction, that's creating that impression. Vecna's plan was never just to destroy the world, it was to reshape it, to create a new order where he was in control, where everything conformed to his vision. And if the epilogue is that new world, if everyone is conforming exactly as he wants them to, then he succeeded. The show's called Stranger Things. Things that are strange, unusual, different. The heroes are the strange things. The kids who don't fit in, the girl with powers, the mother who sees monsters, and an ending where nothing is strange anymore, where everything is normal and expected and conformist. That's not really an ending for Stranger Things. That's a denial of what the show's about. So did Vecna lose? Or did he win by making everyone think they'd won? Did he die, or did he complete his mission of imposing conformity on the world? That's the question at the heart of Conformity Gate. And depending on your answer, the ending is either a sweet conclusion to a beloved show or the most disturbing victory a villain has ever achieved. Now I think it's only fair we talk about why Conformity Gate might not be real. Because honestly, some of the evidence is a bit of a stretch, and it's important to be balanced about this. Let's start with some of the weaker pieces of evidence that have been cited. The Wheeler family haircuts, for example. Yes, Nancy, Mike and Karen all have shorter hair in the epilogue. And yes, if you squint and tilt your head, you could say they look a bit like Henry Creel's hairstyle. But hair is hair. People get haircuts. Styles change. 18 months is a long time, plenty long enough for people to decide they want a new look. Trying to read deep significance into haircuts feels like reaching. It feels like when you're so convinced there's a pattern that you start seeing it everywhere, even in places where it doesn't actually exist. Then there's the thing about people in the background of the graduation scene wearing glasses that look like Henry's. This one's even more of a stretch. Loads of people wear glasses. Round glasses, rectangular glasses, wireframe glasses, whatever. Just because someone in the background happens to have glasses doesn't mean they're meant to represent Henry Creel. That's just how crowds of people look. Some of them wear glasses. If we're going to claim that every person with glasses in the epilogue is a clue, we're getting into territory where anything can mean anything. And when anything can mean anything, nothing actually means anything. There's also the reality of television production that we need to consider. Mistakes happen. Continuity errors slip through. Even on the biggest, most expensive shows with the most meticulous crews, things get missed. The voltage dial changing colours could genuinely be an error. Maybe they had to rebuild the set and the prop department used a different dial. Maybe someone grabbed the wrong piece from storage. Maybe there was a lighting change that made the same dial look different colours in different episodes. There are innocent explanations for this stuff. The same goes for the orange graduation gowns versus the green ones mentioned in the tie-in novel. Tie-in novels aren't always considered fully canon by the main show. Different writers, different levels of oversight. It's possible the show just didn't feel bound by what a novel said about gown colours, or they thought orange looked better on camera, or a million other production reasons. And loads of fans have pointed out that epilogues are often a bit tidy and neat. That's kind of the point of an epilogue. You jump forward in time, you show that everyone's moved on and is doing okay, you give the audience closure. It's a television tradition. Lost did it. Game of Thrones did it. Loads of shows do some version of here's where everyone ended up. The fact that the Stranger Things epilogue feels tidy doesn't necessarily mean it's fake. It might just mean it's an epilogue doing what epilogues do. There's also the fact that the Duffer Brothers have never done anything like this before. They're not typically tricksy storytellers. They're sincere. They wear their influences on their sleeves. They love Spielberg and Stephen King, and those are pretty straightforward storytellers. They create tension and emotion, but they don't typically pull massive conspiracies on their audience. Stranger Things has always been a show that operates in good faith with its viewers. It asks you to invest emotionally, and it rewards that investment. It doesn't pull the rug out with actually nothing you watched mattered because it was all an illusion. That would be cruel, and it doesn't match the Duffers' style. Plus, there's been no official indication that a 9th episode exists. None. The episode count for Season 5 was announced as 8 episodes. The finale was shown in theatres. It was marketed as the series finale. Netflix's own Twitter account posted all episodes of Stranger Things are now playing after the finale dropped. If there was a secret episode, that would require everyone involved in the production, marketing and distribution to be in on it. Hundreds of people. Actors, crew, Netflix employees, theatre owners. That's a massive conspiracy to coordinate, and someone would have leaked something by now. In the age of the internet, where spoilers get out for everything, where scripts get leaked and set photos get posted and actors accidentally say things in interviews, the idea that a secret episode of one of the biggest shows in the world could be kept completely under wraps, that's optimistic at best. Randy Havens, who plays Mr. Clark on the show, even addressed Conformity Gate directly on Instagram. He told fans not to believe everything they read on the internet and clarified that nothing is dropping on January 7th. Now, conspiracy theorists would say that's exactly what he'd say if there was something dropping, but at some point we have to take people at their word. The Duffers themselves, in a podcast interview on January 4th, said they don't have plans to continue stories with the main Stranger Things characters. That's pretty definitive. They're done with this story. They're moving on to other projects. So Conformity Gate might just be a fandom in mourning, a group of fans who aren't ready to say goodbye, who didn't love the ending they got, and who have constructed this elaborate theory as a way to cope with disappointment. It's easier to believe the ending was fake and the real one is coming than to accept that the story's over and it didn't end the way you wanted. And there's no shame in that, honestly. Fandoms do this. When you've invested years of your life into a show, when characters feel like friends, when the world feels real to you, it's hard to let go. Creating theories, looking for hidden meanings, hoping for one more twist, that's all part of processing grief. Some of the evidence for Conformity Gate is genuinely compelling. The voltage dial, the number 7 symbolism, some of the thematic arguments about conformity. But loads of it is also reaching, pattern recognition and wishful thinking. And most importantly, there's no actual proof that a 9th episode exists. Everything is speculation, interpretation, reading meaning into details that might not have any. So yeah, Conformity Gate might be wrong. It might be fans seeing what they want to see. It might be a beautiful, elaborate delusion born from love of the show and reluctance to let it end. But that doesn't mean all the evidence is meaningless. It doesn't mean the questions being raised aren't worth asking. And it doesn't mean that some of these details aren't genuinely odd and hard to explain. So maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. Maybe the Duffers planted some Easter eggs and fun clues without intending them to be part of a massive conspiracy theory. Maybe some of it is intentional and some of it is coincidence. Maybe we'll never really know for sure. Or maybe, just maybe, in a few hours, Netflix will prove everyone wrong and drop the most shocking plot twist in television history. That's the fun of it, isn't it? The uncertainty, the possibility, the shared experience of wondering and waiting and hoping together. So here we are, January 7th, 2026. The day hundreds of thousands of fans believe Netflix will drop the real ending. By the time you're listening to this, you might already know whether they were right. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you're listening to this at the exact moment when the announcement is happening. When Netflix is revealing their 2026 slate. When we're all collectively holding our breath to see if there's a surprise hidden in there. Netflix is making an announcement today. That part's real. They've scheduled this big reveal of their upcoming programming, new shows and returning shows. It's possible, though unlikely, that they could slip a secret episode in there. Just casually announce it like, oh, and by the way, here's one more episode of Stranger Things, surprise. That would be absolutely mental. That would be one of the biggest moments in television history. But probably, realistically, it's just going to be a normal slate announcement. New seasons of Bridgerton and Squid Game, and whatever else they've got coming. No surprise Stranger Things, no secret episode. Just business as usual. And if that happens, if today passes without any big reveal, what then? Does Conformity Gate just end? Do all those thousands of people accept that they were wrong and move on? Or do they find a new date, a new reason to believe, a new piece of evidence that suggests the real ending is still coming? That's the thing about conspiracy theories. They're very difficult to disprove because absence of evidence just becomes evidence of how good the conspiracy is. If nothing drops today, believers can say that's because the Duffers and Netflix are even more clever than we thought, that they're waiting for an even better moment, that there's another layer to this puzzle. But assuming today really is the day, assuming Conformity Gate believers are right and we're about to get a massive reveal, what would that mean? What would that look like? Presumably, it would be a 9th episode that shows the truth. That reveals the epilogue was indeed a Vecna-created illusion, that our heroes are still trapped, and that the real battle is yet to come. It would vindicate everyone who believed, who spent hours analysing screenshots and discussing theories, and refusing to accept that the show was over. And it would be one of the most audacious pieces of storytelling ever attempted in television. To air a false finale, let people sit with it for a week, let the theories build, and then reveal that yes, actually, the fans were right all along. That would be unprecedented. It would also be brilliant marketing. Think about the conversation it would generate. Think about how many people would rewatch all of Season 5 looking for clues they missed the first time. Think about how it would cement Stranger Things as not just a good show, but as a show that respected its audience, enough to trust them with this kind of complex, layered storytelling. But it would also be risky, because if people feel manipulated, if they feel like they wasted emotional energy on a fake ending, that could backfire. Not everyone would see it as clever. Some people would see it as a betrayal. There is confirmed Stranger Things content coming, regardless of whether Episode 9 exists. There's a documentary about the making of Season 5, dropping on Netflix on January 12th. That should be fascinating regardless, seeing how they pulled off all the effects and stunts and emotional moments. And there are spin-offs in development. The Duffers have confirmed they're working on expanding the Stranger Things universe. There's an animated series called Tales from 85 that's been announced, set in the 80s and telling stories from that era. And there's a live-action spin-off focusing on the origins of Henry's powers, the rock in the cave that gave him his abilities. So the world of Stranger Things isn't ending. Even if the main story is done, even if we've seen the last of Eleven and Mike and Will and everyone, there's more to explore, More mysteries, more monsters, more strangeness. But that's not the same as episode 9. That's not the same as finding out that everything we thought was wrong, that our heroes are still in danger, that the story isn't over. What Conformity Gate has done, whether it's real or not, is create this amazing moment of collective anticipation. Hundreds of thousands of people, maybe millions, all wondering the same thing, all waiting for the same answer, all hoping together. And that's special. That's what fandom is about. Not just consuming content, but engaging with it, analysing it, discussing it, creating theories and art and conversations around it, making it bigger than just a show, making it a shared experience. So regardless of what happens today, Conformity Gate has already succeeded in one way. It's brought people together. It's got people talking, thinking, imagining. It's extended the life of Stranger Things beyond its finale, kept it relevant and exciting and full of possibility. And maybe that's the real point. Maybe it doesn't matter if episode 9 exists. Maybe what matters is that we believed it could, that we loved the show enough to hope for more, that we cared enough to look for clues and build theories and refuse to let the story end. And that, my dear friends, is Conformity Gate. A theory, a movement, a beautiful collective delusion, or maybe the most brilliant plot twist ever pulled on a television audience. We've examined the evidence, from the voltage dial to the exit signs, from the orange gowns to the number 7, from character inconsistencies to D and D symbolism. Some of it's compelling, some of it's reaching, all of it's fascinating. By the time you hear this, we might already know the truth, or maybe the uncertainty continues. Maybe the questions remain unanswered. But whether Vecna won or lost, whether episode 9 exists or doesn't, one thing's certain. Stranger Things has given us 10 years of wonder, terror, friendship, and strangeness. And that's real, regardless of what happens today. Until next time, stay safe and sweet dreams.